Stephen Hannon of Kingsclere.
My lords, look at the sheer vastness of what is before us. All to regulate space. Clue is in the name. Space is largely empty. That's why we call it space. Lord McNally counted more than 200 pages. I actually, when you put all four of these essays together, counted more than 500, all to do with the powers, or 90% of it to do with the powers of the regulators, in extreme and precise detail. The appeals procedure, the makeup of the arbitration panels, and all the rest of it. Do we really need this kind of prescriptive law to regulate the vastnesses of what Cardinal Newman called the sidereal firmament? Now, sure, you need some rules, you need some agreements among countries. As we began to sail the high seas, we developed maritime laws, we developed the law of the seas as we went along. And a similar process should pertain as we sail the wide seas of space. But in this manner, with this level of detailed prescription, we are asking for unintended consequences. Now, you might say, my lords, well, what if something goes wrong? You know, what if there's a crash? We need to work out what would be the insurance, who'd be liable, a bit of satellite falls on some other country. You know, we've got to have some regulatory framework. Well, here's the thing. Our common law system is remarkably good at adapting to new technologies and hitherto unencountered situations. In fact, almost every new technology was accommodated within our growing legal system by the application of general principles. For example, the general principle that if you have a dangerous thing in your possession, there is a responsibility on you to keep it leashed. When mining began for the first time, that was a situation like space now, not previously encountered by people who had to determine liability and responsibility. And yet, we coped. Let me quote briefly the case Rylands versus Fletcher from 1868. Water from the defendant's reservoir had flooded the mine shafts of the plaintiff. And the judge, I think, rather brilliantly said the following. We think that the true rule of law is that a person who for his own purposes brings on his land and keeps there anything likely to do mischief if it escapes, must keep it at his peril, and if he doesn't do so, is prima facie liable for all the damage which is the natural consequence of its escape. Those are the general principles which should govern satellites and the charting of space. Regulators are constantly playing catch-up. They're never going to be as smart as the innovators. Governments are always going to be rushing to keep up. How do we regulate clean meat or GM foods or 3D printing or whatever, AI, whatever the latest thing? And in doing so, they almost always get it wrong because they can't foresee the situations that the innovators in the private sector are already dealing with. And that's why this kind of volume of precise civil service written, I have to say, regulation. You can tell that I haven't been here long, my lords, but I can tell the difference between stuff that ministers have decreed and stuff that the bureaucracy are just churning out regardless of who's in office, right? This kind of legal act almost invites disproportionate and unintended consequences. How extraordinary that it should be pursuing us even as we blast off and leave our ancestral planet. We cast off the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God, and we find that even so, the clammy grip of the regulator is dragging us back into its orbit.